Well, executive remuneration, it's a very emotional topic, particularly in light of the recession and market crisis of the past couple of years. PricewaterhouseCoopers has just come out with its latest survey on executive remuneration. Here to tell us more about it is Gerald Seegers. He's Director of Human Resource Services at PWC South Africa. Gerald, thanks for coming in today. Well, executive pay has gone up over the past year by an average 7% according to your survey. That's not as fast as the 23% we saw back in 2008. Are we starting to see the pay gap narrow between executives and workers?
That's a difficult question because I think they're two separate issues. The pay gap, I think, will continue to narrow, obviously, as executive remuneration does decrease, but it is a more political issue. What we have seen, though, globally, our executives have got marginal increases again over the last reporting period, with decreases in bonuses, and that's more in line, maybe not as steep as what we've seen globally, where the increases in average is 1%. With zero bonuses.
Of course, 7% doesn't sound too bad given that inflation is well below 5% at this stage. Of course, we've had a number of strikes recently, more people threatening to go on strike, some workers demanding double-digit pay increases, at least twice that of inflation. Shouldn't executives be leading by example and taking increases in line with inflation? Yeah,
again, I think it's a political issue, but I think with the way we look at executive remuneration relative to the size of the companies that they are running, and at the end of the day, it's shareholders' money we're sitting with that they are looking after. The remuneration tends to be fair and reasonable.
Well, you said relative to the size of the company, so perhaps looking at the JSE, we've got the large cap companies, we've got smaller caps, we've got the all-techs companies. Are we seeing similar increases across the board?
No, definitely not. In our large caps, which we consider to be probably the top 40 companies, there the increases were around 4%, which is in line with inflation, and a decrease in bonuses, compared to the sort of small cap or maybe medium size, where the increases have been sort of averaging around 10%.
Why do you think we're seeing that discrepancy between the small caps and the large caps?
It's probably more the quantums, as the quantums over the two different sizes.
I mean, do you think that government warnings that pay rises should be kept in line with inflation are being heeded by companies?
Yeah, definitely. I think unlike overseas where we've seen a lot of regulators step in and we have seen a lot of intervention from regulators, we've been a little bit milder, but I think that's because we're in better shape. The most common is obviously the financial services sector, so we have seen King 3, for example, which runs across all sectors, and most companies, I think, are adhering to the call to heed increases.
Do you think they're doing that because of public perceptions, though?
Probably a mix of both. I think obviously there's the political agenda and there's also the affordability or the financial agenda.
How about performance-related increases and bonuses? Do we find, of course, we have come through a very tough period, although last year it was a very tough year coming from 2008 where you saw those very large increases. Yeah. Do you think this is having any effect on companies?
We started performance conditions attached to both short-term and long-term incentives started many years ago already. That trend has already started. And also I've seen in South Africa that's improving quite rapidly.
And of course, there is a great move to this globally as well, where particularly bonuses are being pushed out further. So you're not getting a full cash component, you're getting part in cash and the rest in share options. Is that something that you're also seeing within South African businesses?
Definitely, that trend has moved to probably also moving away from longer term incentives, more aggressive short term incentives, but with deferral or clawback. Again, unlike we haven't seen in overseas companies where we've seen, or overseas jurisdictions where we've seen capping or taxation of bonuses.
How about the role of the remuneration committee in all of this? Do we see remuneration committees being strengthened, becoming more prominent on boards of companies?
Definitely, and it's also probably still one of the toughest jobs for non-execs. What they've got to do is manage the balance between the shareholders and the public at large and the remuneration of executives.
Is there a role, do you think, for government interference in this? And of course, we have seen the government, particularly in the UK, coming down on bank execs, coming down on corporate execs. Do you think government should be involved here? Do you think it should be left to boards and the remuneration committees?
Yeah, I think government intervention would be a mistake. I think government guidelines is fair, like we've seen in the King 3, it's these guidelines, and any regulatory interference would be perceived to be negative.
Of course, as the economy recovers and company profits hopefully recover as well, do you think we could get back to the magnitude of the increases we saw a few years ago for executives?
I'm not so sure we'll see that, not in terms of base pay, we won't see those big increases again. We may see more short-term and long-term incentives.